This is Hashtag Finance, presented to you by the Canadian Securities Exchange, the exchange for entrepreneurs. With your host, Anil Mall.
Welcome to another edition of Hashtag Finance. Today I am talking to Galen McNamara, and Galen is the CEO of a company called Summa Silver. Galen, welcome to Hashtag Finance. This is your first time here?
It is. Thanks very much, and great to be here.
Of course. I see you're in the office. You've got the Summa Silver branding in the back, and you're in Vancouver.
That's correct. I'm in Vancouver. I'm in and out of the office occasionally, but still, like a lot of people, mostly working from home.
Mostly working from home. How's things? How have you guys been able to adapt and manage during this pandemic?
Well, you know, it's been a little bit of a challenge for sure. We're lucky in that, you know, our exploration property, the one that we're drilling right now, is located in Nevada. And in Nevada, mining has been classified as an essential business by the governor, Governor Sisolak. It's just such an essential part of their economy, the lifeblood of their economy, really, that, you know, business needed to continue. Maybe not as usual, definitely under, you know, the strict safety measures that I think a lot of mining companies are employing right now. But hey, you know, a lot of people are drilling in Nevada right now, and we're one of them.
Great. Galen, before we begin, why don't you just give our viewers and listeners a brief introduction to Summa Silver? I know you've talked a few things right now, but what specifically are you guys focused on in Nevada?
Yeah, so Summa Silver is a pretty much brand new silver and gold focused exploration and development company. The first project is in Nevada. We listed the company, put the deal together back in April, May. Since then, I've raised $13 million in two financings with great institutional support, including support from Eric Sprott, and have been diligently drilling away on our project called the Hughes project in the historic Tonopah mining district. So this is one of these Wild West historic mining camps that's really never seen any modern exploration. So we're one of the first groups in there to do that.
Yeah, and we're going to get into all of the stuff about the history behind this area and the region that you guys are focused in. There's a lot of colorful characters that come out of there. We'll get into all of that. So obviously, you and I know Nevada as being a historic silver district.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the thing about Nevada is nowadays it's a famous gold producer. You know, I like to say that, you know, if it were a country, it would be the fourth largest gold producer in the world or something like that. But what a lot of people don't know is that Nevada was originally known as the Silver State. And when you drive into Nevada today, the road signs still say, "Welcome to Nevada, the Silver State." And that's because of these two famous old mining districts, these silver rush towns. One of them was the Comstock Lode, and that's up by Reno. And the other one was the Tonopah District. And the Tonopah District was known as the Queen of the Silver Camps. And that's where our Hughes property is, in the Tonopah District.
Yeah, you guys are really, I'm not going to say lucky, but really bullish on being in this historic area and being able to, I know in our chat, you'd mentioned that there's not really been any exploration using modern technology in this area. But before we get into that, maybe we can talk about, obviously we talked about the history of the area a little bit, but why don't you tell us a little bit about what's happened since the beginning in your Tonopah area of Nevada?
Sure. So, you know, it has a really interesting history with a lot of great characters going back to about 1900. I guess as all these old mining camps have, you know, there's always an interesting discovery story. So the discovery story really starts in 1900 with a guy by the name of Jim Butler. Now, Butler was a rancher and not a wealthy rancher. You know, he worked very, very hard. So one day he was on a supply trip coming back from the local town to his ranch. And this would have been maybe 50 or 60 miles through the desert or something like that. And his donkeys ran away from him. So he's chasing the donkeys. He finally catches up with the donkeys. And it just so happens that, you know, the donkeys have stopped on top of these really nice looking veins. So he goes to himself, well, you know, I wonder if there's any gold or silver in these veins. You know, as was in vogue back then, especially in the West and especially in Nevada. You know, I'm sure all of these people were always looking for stuff like that just because of the fabulous wealth that it could bring for the discoverers. So he took a few pieces of these veins back to the town that he had just came from called Klondike, Nevada, which is another interesting corollary, it being called Klondike around that time. But the guy in Klondike who was outfitted to assay the rocks, which really means to tell him how much, to test them and see how much gold and silver was in them, took one look at them, said, these don't look good at all, don't even bother, threw them away, and that was that. So Butler, on his way back through the spot, on his way home, said, you know what, I'm gonna take a few more of these samples. And he carried them back to his ranch with them, and there they sat on the windowsill for most of the summer, so a good couple months. So a couple months goes by. He has a lawyer friend of his by the name of Tasker Oddie come by just to visit for whatever reason, and he takes a look at these samples on the windowsill and goes, you know, hey, what's going on with those? And he tells him the story. So Tasker goes, well, I'll tell you what, I'll get them assayed and, you know, cut me in on some of the claims if we find anything. So I said, okay, that's good. So Tasker got cut in for a quarter share. He took them to another town, got them assayed. Long story short, they're fabulously rich, you know, thousands and thousands of grams per ton silver and a lot of gold. So they knew they were onto something. So he brought the news back to Jim Butler, and even though they were that good, you know, Jim Butler still waited around on his ranch for a couple weeks to finish a hay harvest or something before bothering to go back and stake the claims. So him and his wife went back and staked the claims, and the rest is more or less history. As they started shipping ore out, word got out. There was a very large rush in the area in 1900, and things kind of took off from there. One of the things that Jim Butler did a really good job of was he was one of the first people to lease out little portions of each of the veins, say at 100-foot lengths or 200-foot lengths, because he knew he had a tiger by the tail, and just him and his outfit did not have the manpower it needed to process the ore, you know, to really give it what it needed to get. So what he did was all the people that rushed to town, all the prospectors that rushed to town, he leased out little portions of each of his veins to them on a handshake deal, no paperwork, and said, okay, well, I'll take 1/6 or 1/5 or whatever, and you do all the work. And that was really one of the things that brought the production numbers way up, and eventually attracted outside capital to build significant mines.
And so it'd be fair to say that was the beginning of modern exploration in that region, and kind of getting it out there into the mainstream almost.
That's exactly what happened. Now that wasn't the end for this Tasker Oddie fellow either. So he started out in New York, ended up as a lawyer in Nevada and friends with Jim Butler, but he really had a rich, you know, life after the discovery as well. I mean, obviously they did very well on the discovery and their shares. At one point, Tasker Oddie, just to protect the claims, hired Wyatt Earp and brought him into town and paid him $20 a day, which was like an exorbitant sum at the time. You know, that would be a big money just for some security. But he was on record saying that was some of the best money he ever spent. So I guess that means there was some, you know, there was a darker element, you know, in Tonopah at the time, which is always the case in a lot of these places, right? That's why they call it the Wild West.
Wild West, exactly. And especially in those early days where, you know, so it'd be anything went, anything goes.
Exactly, anything went. But even with this Tasker Oddie fellow, you know, fast forward a few years, he ends up being a state senator. He goes on to be a U.S. senator, and finally was the governor of Nevada for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he obviously made his mark through Jim Butler bringing him the assays and the samples that he had found. And then what happened to Jim Butler?
So Jim Butler, you know, it kind of goes a little dark with Jim Butler after the discovery and after the first, you know, 10 years. But he, you know, he was very successful, continued being involved in the district for a number of years. And I hope to say that, you know, he died rich, but I'm not really sure.
That's probably the case with a lot of those during that time, because it was so much lawlessness.
Yeah, well, exactly. And rags to riches, back to rags again in a lot of situations.
Absolutely. And obviously Jim Butler, Howard, and Tasker Oddie aren't the only ones that are notable within that region. There's also Howard Hughes.
That's right. So another little interesting tidbit of the history of this area was Howard Hughes owned most of the mining claims around Tonopah in the 60s and 70s, including the claims that, we have now. Howard Hughes was an interesting guy. So he inherited money when his parents passed away. His father passed away. His father had a very successful drill bit company where they invented the first drill bit that could drill through rock in oil exploration and production. And the story is his father invented it. But I was reading very recently, just in a biography of Howard Hughes, that his father didn't actually invent it. His father bought it off of a guy in a bar for $50, and the guy subsequently spent half of that on drinks for the bar. And then from there, who knows if that's true. But anyways, it was turned into a multi-million-dollar business. Howard Hughes inherited it as a very young man. He was something like 18 or 20. And didn't really, he was thinking much bigger. So, Howard Hughes was an interesting guy in that he had a lot of different businesses, and he was a very entrepreneurial, industrious person. So he started off with the drill bit company called Hughes Tool Co. From there he got into movies, financed a bunch of Hollywood movies in the 20s and 30s, and some huge successes, some of the biggest productions ever. He was a real visionary. From there, he got into the aviation business.
That's right.
And personally designed, helped personally design at least some very, very fast planes that he flew himself and broke the land speed record at 350 miles an hour or something like that. He flew around the world in record time. He flew from California to New Jersey, not the first transcontinental flight, but he did it in record time as well. So he had three world records for aviation. Which is I think remarkable. He did all this because he wanted, American aviation to be a great example of safe flight, and really show that people could rely on it. But it's kind of ironic because I think he was in 4 plane crashes or something like that, and seriously injured in several of them, including one that he crashed a plane into Beverly Hills and somehow lived. But okay, so that was Howard Hughes. His career near the end of his life, he got interested in mining. Ended up with a bunch of mining claims that he purchased in Nevada and around Tonopah. But unfortunately, by that time, his health was in decline, and he passed away really before he was able to realize that vision for natural resources and mining.
So then what came after the passing of Howard Hughes? Obviously he had just started getting into mining, and what happened to his claims? Did somebody else take over?
Yeah. So they went to a couple of oil companies, held them for a while. A gold company held them for a while. But right around that time is when these lower grade open pit gold deposits really came into vogue in Nevada. And what we're looking at here in Tonopah is a high grade silver district. So these very, very rich gold deposits were popular. They were just being discovered. There was a lot of them to find relatively. So all of the focus for several decades was on these lower grade gold deposits called Carlin style deposits. Because number one, there's a lot of them at surface relatively. Number two, they're just so profitable. So places like Tonopah got a little bit forgotten.
So for any of our audience, sorry to jump in here, but for anybody that's listening, we've got a lot of young listeners, who are just getting into the markets and are looking at ways of investing their money. What is a Carlin-type style trend? Do you want to maybe just give us a small breakdown just so they know?
Sure. So these types of deposits are gold deposits. They usually occur close to surface where we can get them with cheaper open pit mining methods. And the grades are relatively lower compared to some of the mines that, we would try to chase from an underground mining perspective, like say in Northern Ontario or Northern Quebec. They're often very, very large, 10, 20 million ounces is not unheard of for the best ones. And in the last several decades, going back to the 60s when they were first identified, have really turned Nevada into a major, major gold producer. I don't know exactly how many ounces Nevada produces a year. I want to say it's around 5 million ounces, all from deposits like that. Big earth-moving deposits, Northern Nevada, and highly profitable.
Got it. While we're on the topic of some of the characters within this region, some of the historical characters, I should say, Is there anybody else that we might have missed? I know there's a few other guys like George Graham Rice.
Yeah,
There was George
infamous even.
Wingfield, some of the names that we had talked about. Are there anything that you want to mention about those two?
Yeah, so there's a couple more. Tonopah is it's an interesting nexus of Nevada history with some very interesting people. So there's a couple more that deserve some discussion. The first one, his name is George Wingfield. So Wingfield came to Nevada in, I think, 1899, working as a cattle drover from Oregon. Within 5 years, he was the richest man in the state of Nevada. So he started off in Tonopah right after the discovery, a couple years after the discovery in 1902. And a lot of people go to these rush towns to try to be a miner, try to make their fortune mining or prospecting. Others come to sell services and set up shops. Well, George came to Tonopah to gamble. So he started gambling, and within a very, very fast time, I think it was like within 1 year, he had pyramided his winnings into ownership of one of the local casinos and $200,000. So from there,
money back in those days,
which around 1900 would have been, a small fortune, a fortune. So from there, he began speculating in new mining issues. Each of these little towns, these rush towns, would each have their own stock exchange. So he began speculating in properties, in new stocks. Him and a partner eventually had a major win and earned $25 million, which, back then would have been a major fortune, right?
Yeah.
Fast forward a few years, he becomes one of the major influencers for policies in Nevada. So he was one of the main people who pushed to have gambling legalized in Nevada. So still to this day, people like this, their fingerprints are on the state. But we were talking earlier about rags to riches to rags to riches. In the 30s, it was discovered that one of his banks had embezzled $500,000 in state funds. So, that, didn't go well for him. He repaid the money himself, but it bankrupted him.
Yeah.
But fast forward another 5 years, and he's got new mining speculations and new wins, and he's back to being a millionaire, and that's how he died.
Got it. So he was a fighter till the end, basically. Like he's one of the people that didn't want to take no as an answer, basically.
Exactly. A real fighter to the end. And he had a very, very well-known public feud with one other character in the area when they were later in their lives, by the name of George Graham Rice. So Rice, in 1901, he was 30 years old. He had just gotten himself out of jail in New York for forging checks. His original name was Jacob Hertzeg, and he had changed it to George Graham Rice just because I think it sounded more like a salesman's name or something like that. He started a horse race tipping service in New York. So the way that this would work back then is that he would take out advertisements in the New York papers saying, hey, I picked this horse at this race yesterday. It was 10-1. If you subscribe to my mail-in service for $5 a week or whatever it was, I'll give you more tips like this. So that went very, very well for him. He made over $1 million, but in the process, ran afoul with the federal authorities because they accused him basically of his practices were mail fraud. So he, spent all his money trying to defend himself, was eventually run out of New York poor, with $100 in his pocket or something like that, and ended up in Tonopah, trying to make a living, trying to buy properties, speculate on properties, turn them over, sell them in San Francisco. Not unlike what a lot of people do today very successfully. What he ended up doing eventually was starting a stock promotion business. And it was,
a
stock promotion business.
Okay.
Basically selling his own issues. At that time, in Tonopah, and the next town over was called Goldfield. At that time, it was a rush. They were in a major stock bubble. So of course, he had sold these stocks all over the country to investors that really had no idea what they were investing in. But he was a very good salesman, and there were no rules then. So he could send whatever he wanted in the mail. Probably a lot of it was not on the up and up. Made a lot of money, but again ran afoul with the authorities who said, hey, this is mail fraud. So long story short, he ended up back in jail. I think he served 4 different prison terms throughout his life, and didn't have any money at the end. So this guy didn't make it back to riches. He went from rags to riches to rags.
And it's interesting how he started off with the mail tips for horse racing, and then used the idea and concept to do stock promotion.
Exactly. So he's got a book called My Adventures with Your Money.
Okay.
That's quite interesting. That says his perspective of what happened, but a little more research, and it's really easy to get down to what really happened. In that he was a very infamous character of that time that quote unquote legitimate business people did not want to be associated with.
I bet. And I guess you can even say that he was one of the original stock promoters who started investor relations and promoting stocks.
That's right. And before there were any rules.
Before there was any rules, and typically all of these characters, you've obviously done your homework and research within the region. What got you so interested in this region of Nevada?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in Nevada. Number one, because it's such a rich area. I think there's so much more there left to find. It's going to be harder to find, but I think there's a lot of gold left to find there. The southwestern U.S. is also just dotted with old districts that in the 1800s or the early 1900s were mined in a very rudimentary fashion, but haven't seen any modern exploration, haven't seen that modern touch. So I probably for 10 years, I had it in the back of my mind that, I would love to take a shot like this. And when I was first looking at this project in Tonopah, I thought to myself, okay, well, what are some comparables here if we're going to have a win? And I kept coming back to a company like Silvercrest. They went into a historic district in Mexico, big past producer, that hadn't seen any modern exploration at all. They applied some modern tools. I mean, everything went right for them, mind you, but fast forward 5 years and they have a $1.5 billion market cap. So I just thought to myself, well, these are the types of shots I want to take. 10 times out of 10, I want to take a shot like that.
And then, so you guys are in your area, it's the Belmont Mine.
Right. So yeah, we have the eastern side of the historic Tonopah district, but the main past producing asset on the property is called the Belmont Mine. The Belmont Mine was one of America's great silver producers in the 1910s and 1920s. It produced something like 40 million ounces of silver and 400,000 ounces of gold at grades that were like 1,250 grams per ton silver equivalent. So really, really high grade past production, and no modern exploration at all. Before we got involved, I don't even have any records of this thing ever being drilled. They just did exploration differently back then. They would work it underground and drift along structures underground, and they were very diligent. They were very good at getting the silver that they could find, the silver and gold that they can find, but they didn't use those modern techniques that we use today. Even going to drilling, in a very basic way, or in a little more modern way, doing the 3D modeling that, all of the companies do today to see how the veins look underground and really chase after where they could be going on unmined extensions.
Yeah, I mean, technology has come so far along since obviously the 1900s. My question to you would be, obviously this region would be, how accessible is it? Let's just keep it simple.
Well, it's very, very accessible. It's literally on the highway between Las Vegas and Reno. The highway goes through the property, and right beside the town of Tonopah itself, which has such a great mining history going back to 1900. It doesn't really get much better than this in terms of access. It's year-round access, year-round drilling. I've worked in some remote places, whether it be northern Saskatchewan and places where you have to use a helicopter to drill each of your targets. And this isn't one of those places. This is show up with a truck, the drill's mounted on the back of the truck, put it in park and start drilling.
And I do want to talk about your background, but we'll get into all of that in a little bit here. While we were talking about modern technology used to do exploration on this property, obviously you and I know that there's 3D seismic stuff, there's LiDAR and things like that. What sort of stuff are you guys using?
So we're keeping it really simple so far. You know, one thing we were able to get was all the historic mine records, the different plans and geology maps at different levels in the mine that showed exactly where all those veins were. So it really is a matter of putting that all together in 3D and 3D modeling it on our computer to see where, you know, they didn't get to mining. So that's the low-hanging fruit. We're drilling those targets now, and the first results were really good. Other things that we're going to do going forward on areas that are more of have more of an exploration flavor to them is, yeah, you do those ground geophysical surveys, you know, we call them induced polarization, that send an electric current through the ground, and how that current comes back and is read, you know, we can interpret where potential targets are just based on that.
Very interesting. Yeah, we've come such a long way when it comes to tech and being able to look into the ground without being so invasive to the environment.
Exactly. Very, very low impact type, type work. It's laying out some cables on. Oh, sorry. Excuse me.
No, I was just going to say that's a very important point to get out there to the audience, because, there's this misconception out there that mining is really bad for the environment. People go in, they're digging big pits and this and that. So getting it out there that, you're exploring and working in this area without actually being so invasive, being friendly to the environment and the flora and fauna around it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think nowadays, especially, everyone that I know that works in the business, especially people of, my age or our age, that's an important point. It's a priority. Number one, because it's the right thing to do. And number two, because I think from a societal point of view, people just aren't going to stand for the way things were done, 100 years ago.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your team.
Sure.
If we're done with, kind of that portion of it, I wanted to, obviously you're very knowledgeable about the area, the technology, what needs to be done, more importantly. What about your team members? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, we've got an awesome team, a great team, especially for such a young company. So based here in Vancouver, our board and some people I work with, and then also a geological team in Nevada. So let me start with just introducing our management and board, apart from myself. The CFO is Martin Bajik. He helped put the company together from the very beginning. When we put the whole deal together, he worked very hard on getting the listing done with the CSE and was the real driver for that. Decided he wanted to stay on as CFO and director because he liked the story. The second director is a guy by the name of Thomas O'Neill. Again, Thomas was very, very integral in putting the whole thing together from the start. He's in the insurance business. I think he's the largest Manulife insurance dealer for group benefits in Western Canada. And again, he really liked the story here, so wanted to stay on the board. The third board member is Michael Connard. So Mike's a director and founder of Vizsla Resources, and they've had some great, great success very recently on their silver project in Mexico. Mike and I go back a few years, working on a few different projects together and a few different things. Was just a great fit for the company, and he came on a couple months ago, but a great fit for the company because he shares our entrepreneurial spirit and way of thinking. The last director is Brian Gause. Brian Gause is a geologist based in Nevada, in Elko, Nevada. He has a geological consulting outfit called Rangefront Geological. And again, we've been working together on different projects for a couple years and have really gotten to know each other. So Brian and I work together managing the stuff in Nevada, managing the exploration programs in Nevada. The team in Nevada, the project manager is a guy by the name of Chris Gates. Maybe one of the most passionate exploration people I know, and is really looking to cut his teeth in making a new discovery and working in Tonopah. The thing about working in a historic district like this is that, as a geologist, it's just such a unique opportunity to go after something that could be very large. So it really does kind of draw the best of people into it.
Yeah. Michael, I know, I've worked myself in the mining space doing investor relations is how I started off. So
Yeah.
Michael and I have crossed paths at lots of different conferences. One thing about Michael, I can say he's always been very bullish on the mining space.
Yes.
And I can appreciate that. So obviously you guys have a stacked team behind this.
Sorry, Anil, there's one guy, you just said stacked team, and there's one guy that I didn't mention that really needs mentioning. And his name is Garrett Ainsworth. So Garrett Ainsworth is a technical advisor on this deal. Okay. And Garrett and I go back to our uranium days. He is the guy who is responsible for all of the new uranium discoveries on the western side of the Athabasca Basin. He found these boulders, these super ultra high uranium rich boulders in the middle of nowhere that ended up getting traced back to one discovery called PLS, and that's fission uranium, and then another discovery called Arrow at NextGen, and Garrett and I worked very closely together at NextGen.
Got it. So let's talk about you.
Okay.
How did you get started in this, and what makes you so bullish on not only Nevada but the mining space?
Yeah, so going back all the way to how I got into the business, how I even got into being a geologist, I was always good at science in high school, but I also liked economics. I liked business. I ended up taking the first year geology course in university and really liked it, got into it and spent probably 5 or 6 years being really, really into geology, and that was it. I was lucky in that I was able to get summer jobs, through each of my summers off from university. And every time they were in exploration camps, from when I was 18 or something like that. And that really just caused me to catch the bug, this whole gold fever thing. I got really into exploration and really into, seeing what could be possible from a discovery perspective, to the point where I'm kind of obsessed with it. And I have a hard time finding balance. But, here we are, a few years later. So did that, worked all over Canada in a bunch of little small towns and a little bit in the US and a little bit in South America for many different companies and have luckily enough had some success. So this is my first deal. Summa Silver is my first deal as CEO. And I'm always trying to do new, different things just to keep myself challenged, I guess.
Yeah. I'm going to put you on the spot here, and you can choose to answer or not choose to answer. So you've obviously spent time in exploration camps, I think you said, since you were 18.
Yeah.
What's your most memorable camp story if you were to pick one?
Oh, that's a good one. There's been a few. Let me just think for a second here.
You can give me your top 3 if you like.
Well, a lot of times they involve, things that, you probably shouldn't talk about publicly with diamond drillers and this and that, and just dramatic situations. Whenever you get a bunch of people away from home, away from their families for extended periods of times, that can be stressful. But one of the best stories about being camp is actually an exploration story. So this is going back to the early days of NextGen, really before we had hit any major uranium exploration. We had hit some sniffs and knew that we were onto something, but hadn't hit anything big. So we were in camp one day, and this would have been about 2015. Nice summer day, blue skies. Me and another geologist decided that we were going to take a run out to one of the rigs. Just for a nice Sunday afternoon drive, it was a nice day and go and check it out. And so we took our quads, our ATVs out there, parked at the bottom of this hill, and you had to walk up this hill towards the drill. So we did that, and it was about 100 meters. For whatever reason, my friend decided to turn on his radiation detector as we were walking up the hill. And we were still a good, as soon as we got off the quads and started walking up, the thing started to beep just a little bit. We thought to ourselves, okay, well, what's going on? That can't be right. What's going on with this? And we got closer to the drill. It started to beep a lot more. We thought, okay, well, come on. We get up to the rig and the thing is going crazy, totally crazy. And then we put it right next to the core, and it's off the charts. you know, and we thought to ourselves, couldn't be, and got to opening up these core boxes, and lo and behold, threw them open, and you know, it was full of high grade uranium. And we just couldn't believe it
at the same time.
What's that?
I said exciting and very dangerous at the same time.
Exciting, not as dangerous as you'd think. You know, it's really not. The idea with treating uranium is to treat it with respect, and you just don't want it getting inside your body. So I mean, you just don't touch it with your bare hands, and don't touch it and then touch your face, and you're fine.
You guys must have had your hearts racing when you opened up those cores though, and seen the high grade stuff in there.
Absolutely.
What does it look like?
It's basically just coal. It looks like coal. It's very black and heavy.
Got it. But the meter will tell you right away.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You hit the mother load.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you sharing that story. I tend to ask everybody what, especially if they've been in exploration stages, what their favorite part of being on camp or one of these stories is. So I really like that one, especially with a good outcome to it.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's go back to Belmont Mine. You mentioned that you guys have been doing more work using new technology. You've done some drilling there. Why don't you give us a little bit of info on what's happening there right now?
Sure.
And the milestones that our viewers can look out for in the coming months.
Yeah. So we've been diligently drilling away since the beginning of July. The original program called for 7,500 meters, but I can say now that we're through that and continuing drilling. We were really, really happy to share our first drill results last week. And those were just 3 holes from around the Belmont Mine. The first 3 holes, all of them hit high grade silver, over 2,000 grams per ton silver equivalent, which is very, very high grade. The best one, the real heavy hitter here, was 2.5 meters of 3,760 grams per ton silver equivalent. And that was within a much wider interval of 18.5 meters of 596 grams per ton silver equivalent. So very, very strong start. That's just one target area of 4 target areas that we're testing very broadly, just to get an idea of what could be there, so we know the best areas to follow up on with subsequent drilling. And I think we're going to have a very, very busy few years. So going forward, I think the catalysts first and foremost are more drill results. As we receive assays, we'll batch them out in stages over the next few months. And then just continue, I think, to drill from there. There will be a significant drill program in 2021. And hey, if everything goes according to plan here, we'll be looking at doing a resource estimate within the next couple of years.
Got it. Well, hey, we hope that you're able to come back in 2021. Once this is all said and done, we can do an update. We can talk about some of the characters that we might have missed. Maybe you'll have another camp story for us instead or not.
There might be 1 or 2 more, sure.
I hope so. But what I'm going to do is, before we end off, I'm going to leave the floor with you to provide our viewers, listeners, your shareholders, and investors a message that you'd like to put out there.
Yeah, you know what? That catches me by surprise. But, hey, Summa Silver is a great new story, brand new stock. It's really hard to find quality silver and gold stocks. I know that because I spent a lot of time looking for silver properties, and I still do. It's very, very hard to find good silver properties. Hey, take a look at Summa Silver, consider adding it to your watch list, and definitely keep us in mind.
Where can they follow you guys? Are you guys active on social media? What's your website?
Yes, exactly. So we're at Summa Silver on Twitter, and we also have a LinkedIn account, Summa Silver.
Perfect. We'll make sure to add the links to your website and your Twitter in our show notes, so everybody can look out for that. One thing I wanted to leave with, you have an extensive knowledge of the past historical, like the history of Nevada and the region and mining. What would be, if you had to pick one book that people that are interested can read to get better knowledge on this area and mining, what would you suggest?
One book. Okay. So there's a new book that just came out in the last year called The Bonanza King. This one is about a guy by the name of John Mackey, an Irish immigrant who found some of the richest deposits in the Comstock Lode, the other silver district in Nevada. That is a very, very, very good biography.
The Bonanza King.
The Bonanza King.
Okay, I'll definitely look out for that one. Galen, we at the CSE truly appreciate your vision. you and your team's vision for the company, for Summa Silver. We appreciate you guys being listed with us. Look forward to having you on again, and wish you guys nothing but the success in the coming months and years.
Great. Well, thanks very much, and it's just been really nice to have this chat with you.
Yeah, likewise. It's not only been educational, but it's also been entertaining, and that's great.
Great.
For our viewers that are listening or watching, this has been a hashtag finance podcast with Galen McNamara, who's the CEO of Summa Silver. If you find content like this informative, I suggest that you subscribe to CSE TV if you haven't already. Hit like if you find this informative, and feel free to share this with your family and friends. Galen, thank you so much. It's Thanksgiving weekend here in Canada, so for you and your family that are out here locally, happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks very much. You too, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone listening.
Thank you.